So, looks like Donald Trump is going to be president again. Don't we just love setbacks to trans rights? I made a video about this in 2016, and so since it has happened again, I thought it would be appropriate for me to do it yet again. I have very much not been okay since the election happened, for reasons that will become obvious very shortly. But, in case my viewing audience lives under a rock and has not been paying attention to transgender politics for the past 3 years, here's a quick recap of why I'm not okay. Firstly, the GOP spent $215 million on anti-trans ads this election cycle, which is more than they spent on any other issue. In the last 3 years, there has been a full frontal assault on trans rights in every Republican majority state. Specifically, in my home state of Ohio this last year, youth transgender hormone therapy, puberty blockers, were outlawed. Sports. Trans girls were banned from playing sports for girls. And in my home state of Florida, it is currently rated do not travel by Aaron Reed and the ACLU because they have passed laws against trans people using the bathroom in any publicly owned facility. A ban on changing the gender on your federal identification documents. They have removed gender identity from non-discrimination laws. And they passed a law that forces nurse practitioners to not be legally allowed to prescribe hormone replacement therapy, which kicked 2/3 to 80%, depending on the source, of Floridians who are trans off of their health care. Republicans, of course, defended this by saying, oh, we're just passing common sense laws, we just want to protect children. It's not children. 12 Republican majority states have now passed anti-trans laws targeting adults. In addition to transgender care for minors now being illegal in all but 2 Republican majority states. To back these laws up, Odessa, Texas just passed a $10,000 bounty law that rewards private citizens for turning what they suspect is a trans person illegally using the bathroom into their local authorities. Last year, at the Conservative Political Action Conference, Speaker Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire said the following:
transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Those are unfortunately just the things that have happened already. And the party that supported these policies, that has made life a living hell for trans people in every single red state, just won the trifecta: the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. And you've already seen what happened at the Supreme Court. Yeah. But, okay, actual policy. Ignoring the past, what exactly did Trump run on in this election cycle? The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, which is a mandate for leadership drafted by the country's largest Republican think tank, calls for the following: deleting sexual orientation and gender identity from every federal law. The removal of gender-affirming care from Medicare and Medicaid. An end to all federal funding for gender-affirming care. Rewriting all U.S. laws to define sex as only referring to sex assigned at birth. They call it biological sex, it's sex assigned at birth. I refuse to submit to their framing. Okay, but that's just Project 2025, you might say. Trump made repeated efforts to distance himself from this during the campaign process, even though most of his staff was behind it, but let's assume that is in good faith. Let's just look at Trump's platform for trans people. It calls for a federal ban on gender-affirming care for minors, an end to all programs mentioning gender transition at any age, cutting federal funding for any school that mentions transgender people, and a nationwide ban on transgender athletes competing in their genders division, as well as a federal law establishing sex as only referring to a sex assigned at birth. He has also personally called us
gender insanity, transgender cult, mutilation of our youth.
Kamala's for they, them.
The disfigurement of our youth.
He's not even trying to hide it anymore. They are coming for our federal rights, and they're not being subtle about it. They will make it so that it is illegal for us to exist in society. I don't understand how anyone, in good faith, can tell us to our face that this isn't going to happen. Like, they're not being subtle about it. They are telling us exactly what they are going to do. Masha Gessen, who is a trans reporter who escaped Russia under fear of persecution, said the following about surviving autocracy. Rule 1. Believe the autocrat. He means what he says. Most of the people who are making excuses for why this isn't what they're actually going to do, it's a defense mechanism. They're trying to protect themselves. It's all about not wanting to own up to when the policies that they voted for cause harm to other people. They will still refuse to. Hi, Maya. My kitty will provide levity. Good kitty, good kitty. That's what people do. They will never admit that they were wrong, or that they hurt someone else, regardless of the evidence to the contrary. And yet, despite that, the main point of this video will still be trying to convince them. I want to convince those who are still defending the indefensible and saying, oh, you're overreacting, he's not coming for trans people. And by the way, they told me exactly the same thing after the 2016 election. Caitlyn Jenner, for instance, said, no, Trump will actually be good for trans rights, you'll see. She actually spoke against him when he started passing policies that were against trans people.
This is a disaster, and you can still fix it. You made a promise to protect the LGBTQ community. Call me.
And now, in 2024, she is a contributor on Fox News.
If I would have been in fourth grade and I had my math teacher start, doing a gender ideology class, and maybe I would have gone a completely different path and my life would have been ruined. So I'm not for all of this.
Has returned her Woman of the Year award because she is openly saying that she is not a woman, and she is now against open access to transgender hormone therapy. It goes to show you just how far the Overton window has moved. And most people didn't even notice it moving, but trust me, I have. But I will interact with your argument in good faith, and I am here to convince you otherwise, so buckle up. Firstly, I made a video in 2016 about what I was expecting to happen, and why I thought it was a huge step back for trans rights. Of course, all the naysayers told me I was overreacting, and yes, I do still have friends who are defending Trump and who are telling me that I'm wrong. Just yesterday, one of my Facebook friends said, Trump was president before and you and other minorities survived. Why do you think this time is different? Well, I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong, so let's check my predictions from 2016. How accurate or not accurate was I? Did I actually predict things that were going to happen, or was I just exaggerating and fear-mongering about Trump, but he wasn't in fact as bad as I was predicting? Alright. Let's go with a credibility check. I laid out 4 things that I believe were very likely to happen. And then I laid out 5 things that I considered a possible worst-case scenario. How did I do? Prediction number 1.
And Trump has already announced that he is going to repeal all of Obama's executive orders as well as the Affordable Care Act.
I was right about this. Within a month of taking office, Trump issued an executive order that repealed gender identity from the list of federally protected statuses under discrimination laws. Prediction number 2. Trump will repeal the Affordable Care Act. He tried. The vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act, with Trump egging it on the whole time, made it through the House, and it was on track to make it through the Senate, and be signed into law. Then, this happened. Senators John McCain, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski broke with Republicans, and the bill failed by a single vote, 51-49. But, even though it didn't succeed, they tried. They very much intended to repeal Obamacare. So, yes, I was correct on their intent, but you could say that no, I wasn't right on it actually succeeding. And I'm glad that it didn't succeed, but we were this close. Prediction number 3.
Unfortunately, right now, school districts across the country are locked in a legal battle over Title IX protecting transgender youth, and with a conservative Supreme Court, there's a very real chance that we're going to lose that battle.
Yes, once again I was right, and once again he did this via executive order within a month of taking office. Yet again, February 2017, right alongside that civil rights repeal. So, gender identity is no longer protected amongst Title IX. Prediction number 4. The conservative majority Supreme Court is likely to mean that we're going to lose the legal battle over gender identity being covered in Title IX rights long term. I was right again. Just this year, Biden attempted to reinstate Title IX covering gender identity under the definition of sex discrimination. And the Supreme Court blocked its enforcement in a 5-4 vote, strictly along party lines, with Neil Gorsuch being the only conservative who crossed the aisle to join the 3 liberal justices in dissenting. So we lost that battle. 4 predictions! All 4 were correct. Okay, 3.5 out of 4 if you want to include intent as opposed to actual results. But I knew exactly what was going to happen. All of those likelies turned into actual policy. And it was nakedly obvious that that was what they were trying to do because it was literally written in their platform. Okay, moving on. Now, on to the worst case scenario predictions that I made. There were 5 of them. This is maybe where you could make a case that I was fear-mongering, because none of these were part of the official platform. All I had to go on was the Family Research Council, who had released a 5-point plan on how they could legislate trans people out of existence. How did I do? Let's take a look at these outrageous fears.
There's even a chance that we may lose the ability to access transition entirely if the Family Research Council's 5-point plan comes to pass.
Analyst Bryn Tannehill, in a Huffington Post article, summarized that Family Research Council plan as follows. When the anti-transgender student bill in South Dakota passed, it was the first step in a plan to eradicate transgender people from American life. Last year, the Family Research Council laid out a 5-point plan to legislate trans people out of existence by making the legal, medical, and social climate too hostile for anyone to transition in. Number 1. States and the federal government should not allow legal gender marker changes. Step 2. Transgender people should not have any legal protections against discrimination, nor should anyone be forced to respect their identity. Number 3. Transgender people should not be legally allowed to use facilities in accordance with their gender identity. Number 4. Medical coverage related to transition should not be provided by the government or any other entity. Number 5. Transgender people should not be allowed to serve in the military. If you can't wrap your head around how that would legislate trans people out of existence, I want you to stop for a moment and think. Imagine that you are a trans person. Now imagine that you cannot get an accurate government ID. A world where you cannot vote, cannot drive without risking harassment from police, and can't get a job without outing yourself because your gender marker will always be wrong. There's a chance that you can't even prove who you are, because no one will believe that your ID is real if it says M but you look like... You will never be treated as your correct gender by any government agency. What ID you have will constantly out you as transgender, inviting discrimination. Perfectly legal discrimination if Part 2 of their plan succeeds. So, how much of that 5-point plan actually did succeed? Number 1, no gender change on federal IDs. This did not happen federally, but it very much did happen at the state-by-state level. It is now illegal to change the gender marker on your driver's license in 4 Republican states: Florida, Kansas, Tennessee, and Texas. Federally, there were no actual bills or laws. The worst we got was a leaked 2018 memo from the Department of Health and Human Services, which included the following provision. Quote, "The sex listed on a person's birth certificate, as originally issued, shall constitute definitive proof of a person's sex unless rebutted by reliable genetic evidence." We all know what genetic evidence means. This memo never became an actual bill, but it proves that this plan was indeed fomenting under the surface. I rate this as half true. It is indeed now illegal for 63 million Americans to change the gender marker on their ID for any reason, which is just under 1/5 of the entire US population. But no federal law was passed, so I will give them that. Number 2, transgender people should not have any legal protections against discrimination, nor should anyone be forced to respect their identity. Obviously, this one happened. Gender identity was no longer considered a protected federal status during Trump's first administration because his executive order removed it. Biden restored it, once again via executive order in 2021, but obviously this isn't going to last for long once Trump gets back in office. Our civil rights have spent the last 9 years getting thrown back and forth like a freaking football. Number 3, transgender people should not be legally allowed to use facilities in accordance with their gender identity. Trump never proposed a national ban. However, what he did do is remove Obama's federal guidance that said that schools should allow trans youth to use the bathroom in accordance with their gender identity. And, as tends to happen when you remove federal guidance, it allows individual states to pass adult bathroom bans. 10 Republican states have now passed partial or full bathroom bans for trans people using publicly owned restrooms. And actually, it's 11 now because Ohio just passed a ban of trans people using properly gendered bathroom in Ohio colleges in a lame duck session as a rider attached to a completely unrelated school funding bill. This is what they do. My entire family lives in Florida, and now I can no longer legally visit them without breaking the law every time I use the bathroom at a rest stop, every time I go to a college sporting event, or visit my mom at the University of South Florida, or go to the beach. All of those, I have to break the law just in order to pee. So, even though Trump didn't do this, he is the one who enabled it. And this is now again the reality for trans people in pretty much every red state in the country. He repealed the federal protections that would have stopped it. Number 4, medical coverage related to transition should not be provided by the government or any other entity. This one also happened. Trump, in the summer of 2020, we had much bigger things that we should have been worrying about, eliminated federal protections for trans people's healthcare. We can now legally be discriminated against and denied coverage. And recently, Dr. Marcy Bowers, who is the highest volume GRS surgeon in America, stopped using Medicare and Medicaid because the claims kept getting denied. This happened, and it's still happening. This is exactly what led to one of Republicans' most persistent attacks on Kamala Harris being,
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
for the record, 2. 2 people have ever had gender-affirming surgery while in prison. This is a non-issue. We don't police anyone else's medically necessary procedures in this country just because a person is incarcerated. The only reason they're making this an issue is to establish a national precedent that says trans healthcare isn't healthcare. But of course, Democrats never stood up for us on this, because the truth doesn't exist anymore. Welcome to hell. Sign-up sheet is on the right, we have cookies in the lobby, meetings are every other Tuesday. Number 5, transgender people should not be allowed to serve in the military. True, Trump issued a military ban of trans people shortly after taking office, and it took effect on April 12, 2019. It was the law of the land for 2 years until one Joseph Biden Jr. reversed it. So, out of those fear-mongering, this is my greatest fear 2016 predictions, 3 of them came to pass, specifically because of actions by the Trump administration. And the other 2, all 5 points of the Family Research Council's plan, came to pass in my home state of Florida, pushed exclusively by Ron DeSantis and Republicans. Reading those old predictions has only made me realize one thing: just how far to the right the Overton window has shifted, and how far centrist views on the acceptable amount of rollbacks on trans rights have shifted right along with it. In 2016, people called us crazy for being afraid that Trump would remove our federal non-discrimination protections, and the absolute worst-case scenarios were attacks on trans healthcare or IDs or bathroom usage. Now we are scared of our literal existence and medical procedures might be made illegal. All they would have to do is make the laws that are currently on the book in Florida and Texas national, and that's it. Transgender people would be legislated out of existence and not able to live without breaking the law in every single state. And that's the best case scenario this time. Republicans have already tried to attach 50 anti-trans riders to must-pass budget appropriation bills this year. Democrats fortunately fought them on this and stripped them out, but 50. Worst case scenario now? We might become a literal electoral autocracy, which means possible bans on even talking about LGBT issues to other people in public, or displaying pride flags in any public space. Those could be declared illegal LGBT propaganda if we're going the route of Hungary and Russia. Or, I don't know, let's just call it the Patriotism Not Pride Act, currently advancing through the Oklahoma State Legislature. Oklahoma, 0 days without a national embarrassment. And still, my centrist friends are telling me that I'm overreacting, or making excuses for why these laws aren't hateful, actually. At this point, I doubt anything would be considered not hateful to this people, short of us being declared sexual predators in mass and rounded up into camps. I'm not even confident that they'd do that much. They'd still be making excuses for why it wasn't discrimination, actually. For the record, though, I don't think that is actually going to happen. Like, people are in fear because people call Trump a fascist. And while I agree with that label, this is not the 1930s anymore. Fascism does not look like Hitler anymore. It looks like Putin and Orban, electoral autocracy. There is no need for concentration camps and gulags if you can just as easily remain in power without them while maintaining the supposed legitimacy of being elected democratically, even if the rules are rigged. In my last election video, I expressed a great deal of hope that we would get through this. I was confident that the misery that was upon us was but the passing of greed, the bitterness of people who fear the way of human progress. The hate of the people would pass, and the autocrats die, and the power they took from the people would return to the people if we only stood together. In that video, I specifically cited the 2016 failed re-election campaign for Pat McCrory as a reason for us to have long-term hope. He lost that re-election bid specifically due to House Bill 2, the 2016 North Carolina bathroom bill. This bill was a PR disaster, which cost the state nearly $1 billion in lost revenue due to boycotts. The NCAA, the NBA, musicians, and businesses all pulled out of North Carolina in opposition to the clearly discriminatory bill. In 2024, almost every single red state has now passed laws against trans people. And where are those corporate boycotts now? Non-existent. Nobody is talking about pulling out of Florida or Texas because of their Don't Say Gay bill or their adult bathroom bans, which for the record are every bit as bad as North Carolina's was. And DeSantis and Abbott, unlike McCrory, were not defeated. They were re-elected by overwhelming 20% and 11% margins. Disney tried to speak against Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, but they lost the battle due to DeSantis weaponizing taxes and regulations to muzzle them for daring to speak out. And Disney lost its lawsuit against DeSantis for that retaliation and muzzling. It was rejected by a Trump-appointed judge who was a member of the Federalist Society. Because of course he was. Republicans successfully used a strategy straight out of Viktor Orban's playbook to silence opposition, and they got away with it, because they've already captured the referees. This isn't 2016 anymore. Corporations aren't coming to save us this time. They stopped caring about our rights as soon as it became the least bit inconvenient for them to do so. Republicans won that war. We didn't even win the popular vote this time. This is what the people wanted. Federalist Society controls the courts. Elon Musk owns Twitter. And Jeff Bezos personally killed an endorsement for Kamala Harris because he was scared that Trump would retaliate. Nobody is coming to save us this time. I take absolutely no pleasure in being right about 2016 or Trump's anti-trans agenda, even though I let people gaslight me into believing that everything would be fine if I just gave him a chance. I would only ask the people who are still diminishing my fears and telling me that I'm overreacting to wake the fuck up.